The modern scripture Buddha, the Gospel, is brought to you by Not a Prophet org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. The cruel crane outwitted a tailor who used to make robes for the Brotherhood, was wont to cheat his customers, and thus prided himself on being smarter than other men. But once, on entering upon an important business transaction with a stranger, he met his master in the way of cheating, and suffered a heavy loss. The Blessed One said, "This is not an isolated incident in the greedy tailor's fate. In other incarnations he suffered similar losses, and by trying to dupe others ultimately ruined himself. This same greedy character lived many generations ago as a crane near a pond, and when the dry season set in, he said to the fishes with a bland voice, 'Care you not anxious for your future welfare, there is at present very little water and still less food in this pond. What will you do should the whole pond become dry in this drought?' 'Yes, indeed,' said the fishes, 'what should we do?' Replied the crane, 'I know a fine, large lake, which never becomes dry. Would you not like me to carry you there in my beak?' When the fishes began to distrust the honesty of the crane, he proposed to have one of them sent over to the lake to see it. And a big carp at last decided to take the risk for the sake of the others, and the crane carried him to a beautiful lake and brought him back in safety. Then all doubt vanished, and the fishes gained confidence in the crane, and now the crane took them one by one out of the pond, and devoured them on a big verana tree. There was also a lobster in the pond, and when the crane wanted to eat him too, he said, 'I have taken all the fishes away, and put them in a fine, large lake. Come along, I shall take thee too, but how wilt thou hold me to carry me along?' asked the lobster. 'I shall take hold of thee with my beak,' said the crane. 'Thou wilt let me fall if thou carry me like that.' 'I will not go with thee,' replied the lobster. 'Thou needst not fear,' rejoined the crane, 'I shall hold thee quite tight all the way.' Then said the lobster to himself, 'If this crane once gets hold of a fish, he will certainly never let him go in a lake. Now if he should really put me into the lake, it would be splendid, but if he does not, then I will cut his throat and kill him.' So he said to the crane, 'Look here, friend, thou wilt not be able to hold me tight enough, but we lobsters have a famous grip. If thou wilt let me catch hold of thee round the neck with my claws, I shall be glad to go with thee.' The crane did not see that the lobster was trying to outwit him, and agreed. So the lobster caught hold of his neck with his claws as securely as with a pair of blacksmith's pincers, and called out, 'Ready, ready, go!' Crane took him and showed him the lake, and then turned off toward the verana tree. 'My dear uncle,' cried the lobster, 'the lake lies that way, but thou art taking me this other way.' Answered the crane, 'Thinkest so? Am I thy dear uncle? Thou meanest me to understand, I suppose, that I am thy slave, who has to lift thee up and carry thee about with him, where thou pleasest. Now cast thine eye upon that heap of fish bones at the root of yonder verana tree. Just as I have eaten those fish, every one of them, just so will I devour thee also.' 'Ah, those fishes got eaten through their own stupidity,' answered the lobster, 'but I am not going to let thee kill me. On the contrary, it is thou that I am going to destroy, for thou in thy folly hast not seen that I have outwitted thee. If we die, we both die together, for I will cut off this head of thine and cast it to the ground.' So saying, he gave the crane's neck a pinch with his claws as with a vise. Then gasping, and with tears trickling from his eyes, and trembling with the fear of death, the crane besought the lobster, saying, 'Oh, my lord, indeed I did not intend to eat thee. Grant me my life very well. Fly down and put me into the lake,' replied the lobster, and the crane turned round and stepped down into the lake, to place the lobster on the mud at its edge. Then the lobster cut the crane's neck through as clean as one would cut a lotus stalk with a hunting knife, and then entered the water. When the teacher had finished this discourse, he added, 'Not now only was this man outwitted in this way, but in other existences, too, by his own intrigues. 4 kinds of merit. There was a rich man who used to invite all the Brahmins of the neighborhood to his house, and, giving them rich gifts, offered great sacrifices to the gods. But the Blessed One said, if a man each month repeat 1,000 sacrifices and give offerings without ceasing, he is not equal to him who but for one moment fixes his mind upon righteousness. The Buddha continued, there are 4 kinds of offering. First, when the gifts are large and the merit small. Secondly, when the gifts are small and the merit small. Thirdly, when the gifts are small and the merit large. And fourthly, when the gifts are large and the merit is also large. The first is the case of the deluded man, who takes away life for the purpose of sacrificing to the gods, accompanied by carousing and feasting. Here the gifts are great, but the merit is small indeed. Next, the gifts are small, and the merit is also small, when from covetousness and an evil heart a man keeps to himself a part of that which he intends to offer. The merit is great, however, while the gift is small, when a man makes his offering from love and with a desire to grow in wisdom and in kindness. And lastly, the gift is large, and the merit is large when a wealthy man, in an unselfish spirit and with the wisdom of a Buddha, gives donations and founds institutions for the best of mankind to enlighten the minds of his fellow men and to administer unto their needs. The light of the world. There was a certain Brahmin in Kasambai, a wrangler and well versed in the Vedas. As he found no one whom he regarded as equal in debate, he used to carry a lighted torch in his hand, and when asked for the reason of his strange conduct, he replied, "The world is so dark that I carry this torch to light it up as far as I can." A samana sitting in the market place heard these words and said, "My friend, if thine eyes are blind to the sight of the omnipresent light of day, do not call the world dark. Thy torch adds nothing to the glory of the sun, and thy intention to illumine the minds of others is as futile as it is arrogant." Whereupon the Brahmin asked, "Where is the sun of which thou speakest?" And the samana replied, "The wisdom of the Tathagata is the sun of the mind. His radiancy is glorious by day and night, and he whose faith is strong will not lack light on the path to nirvana, where he will inherit bliss everlasting." Luxurious living, while the Buddha was preaching his doctrine for the conversion of the world in the neighborhood of Savatthi, a man of great wealth who suffered from many ailments came to him with clasped hands and said, "World Donner, Buddha, pardon me for my want of respect in not saluting thee as I ought, but I suffer greatly from obesity, excessive drowsiness, and other complaints, so that I cannot move without pain." Tathagata, seeing the luxuries with which the man was surrounded, asked him, "Hast thou a desire to know the cause of thy ailments?" And when the wealthy man expressed his willingness to learn, the Blessed One said, "There are 5 things which produce the condition of which thou complainest: opulent dinners, love of sleep, hankering after pleasure, thoughtlessness, and lack of occupation. Exercise self-control at thy meals, and take upon thyself some duties that will exercise thy abilities and make thee useful to thy fellow men. In following this advice thou wilt prolong thy life." The rich man remembered the words of the Buddha, and after some time, having recovered his lightness of body and youthful buoyancy, returned to the World Donnered One, and coming afoot without horses and attendants, said to him, "Master, thou hast cured my bodily ailments. I come now to seek enlightenment of my mind." And the Blessed One said, "The worldling nourishes his body, but the wise man nourishes his mind. He who indulges in the satisfaction of his appetites works his own destruction, but he who walks in the path will have both the salvation from evil and a prolongation of life." The communication of bliss. Anabhara, the slave of Sumana, having just cut the grass on the meadow, saw a samana with his bowl begging for food. Throwing down his bundle of hay, he ran into the house and returned with rice that had been provided for his own food. The samana ate the rice and gladdened him with words of religious comfort. The daughter of Sumana, having observed the scene from a window, called out, "Good, Anabhara, good, very good." Sumana, hearing these words, inquired what she meant, and on being informed about Anabhara's devotion and the words of comfort he had received from the samana, went to his slave and offered him money to divide the bliss of his offering. "My lord," said Anabhara, "let me first ask the venerable man." And approaching the samana, he said, "My master has asked me to share with him the bliss of the offering I made thee of my allowance of rice. Is it right that I should divide it with him?" The samana replied in a parable. He said, "In a village of 100 houses, a single light was burning. Then a neighbor came with his lamp and lit it, and in this same way the light was communicated from house to house, and the brightness in the village was increased. Thus the light of religion may be diffused without stinting him who communicates it. Let the bliss of thy offering also be diffused. Divide it. Anubhara returned to his master's house and said to him, I present thee, my lord, with a share of the bliss of my offering. Deign to accept it. Sumana accepted it and offered his slave a sum of money, but Anubhara replied, Not so, my lord. If I accept thy money, it would appear as if I sold thee my share. Bliss cannot be sold. I beg thou wilt accept it as a gift. The master replied, Brother Anubhara, from this day forth thou shalt be free. Live with me as my friend, and accept this present as a token of my respect. The listless fool, there was a rich Brahmin, well advanced in years, who, unmindful of the impermanence of earthly things, and anticipating a long life, had built himself a large house. The Buddha wondered why a man so near to death had built a mansion with so many apartments, and he sent Ananda to the rich Brahmin, preached to him the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path of Salvation. The Brahmin showed Ananda his house and explained to him the purpose of its numerous chambers, but to the instruction of Buddha's teachings he gave no heed. Ananda said, It is the habit of I fools to say, I have children and wealth. He who says so is not even master of himself. How can he claim possession of children, riches, and servants? Many are the anxieties of the worldly, but they know nothing of the changes of the future. Scarcely had Ananda left, when the old man was stricken with apoplexy and fell dead. The Buddha said, For the instruction of those who are ready to learn, a fool, though he live in the company of the wise, understands nothing of the true doctrine, as a spoon tastes not the flavor of the soup. He thinks of himself only, and unmindful of the advice of good counselors is unable to deliver himself. A rescue in the desert, there was a disciple of the Blessed One, full of energy and zeal for truth, who, living under a vow to complete a meditation in solitude, flagged in a moment of weakness. He said to himself, The teacher said there are several kinds of men. I must belong to the lowest class and fear that in this birth there will be neither path nor fruit for me. What is the use of a herm, its life, if I cannot by constant endeavor attain the insight of meditation to which I have devoted myself? And he left the solitude and returned to the Jetavana. When the brethren saw him, they said to him, Thou hast done wrong, O brother, after taking a vow, to give up the attempt of carrying it out. And they took him to the master. When the Blessed One saw them, he said, I see, O mendicants, that you have brought this brother here against his will. What has he done? Lord, this brother, having taken the vows of sanctifying a faith, has abandoned the endeavor to accomplish the aim of a member of the order, and has come back to us. Then the teacher said to him, Is it true that thou hast given up trying? It is true, O Blessed One, I was the reply. The master said, This present life of thine is a time of grace. If thou fail now to reach the happy state, thou wilt have to suffer remorse in future existences. How is it, brother, that thou hast proved so irresolute? Why, in former states of existence thou wert full of determination. By thy energy alone the men and bullocks of 500 wagons obtained water in the sandy desert, and were saved. How is it that thou now givest up? By these few words that brother was re-established in his resolution, but the others besought the Blessed One, saying, Lord, tell us how this was. Listen, then, O mendicants. Said the Blessed One, and having thus excited their attention, he made manifest a thing concealed by change of birth. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was reigning in Kasi, the Bodhisattva was born in a merchant's family, and when he grew up he went about trafficking with 500 carts. One day he arrived at a sandy desert many leagues across. The sand in that desert was so fine that when taken in the closed fist it could not be kept in the hand. After the sun had risen it became as hot as a mass of burning embers, so that no man could walk on it. Those, therefore, who had travel over it took wood and water and oil and rice in their carts, and traveled during the night. And at daybreak they formed an encampment and spread an awning over it, and taking their meals early they passed the day lying in the shade. At sunset they supped, and when the ground had become cool, they yoked their oxen and went on. The traveling was like a voyage over the sea. A desert pilot had to be chosen, and he brought the caravan safe to the other side by his knowledge of the stars. Thus the merchant of our story crossed the desert. And when he had passed over 59 leagues, he thought, now, in one more night we shall get out of the sand. And after supper he directed the wagons to be yoked, and so set out. The pilot had cushions arranged on the foremost cart, and lay down, looking at the stars and directing the men where to drive. But worn out by want of rest during the long march, he fell asleep, and did not perceive that the oxen had turned round, and taken the same road by which they had come. The oxen went on the whole night through. Towards dawn the pilot woke up, and, observing the stars, called out, "Stop the wagons, stop the wagons." The day broke just as they stopped, and were drawing up the carts in a line. Then the men cried out, "Why, this is the very encampment we left yesterday. We have but little wood left, and our water is all gone. We are lost." And unyoking the oxen and spreading the canopy over their heads, they lay down in despondency, each one under his wagon. But the Bodhisattva said to himself, "If I lose heart, all these will perish," and walked about while the morning was yet cool. On seeing a tuft of kusa grass, he thought, "This could have grown only by soaking up some water which must be beneath it." And he made them bring a spade and dig in that spot, and they dug 60 cubits deep. And when they had got thus far, the spade of the diggers struck on a rock. And as soon as it struck, they all gave up in despair. But the Bodhisattva thought, there must be water under that rock. And descending into the well, he got upon the stone, and stooping down, applied his ear to it, and tested the sound of it. He heard the sound of water gurgling beneath, and when he got out, he called his page. "My lad, if thou givest up now, we shall all be lost. Do not lose heart. Take this iron hammer, and go down into the pit, and give the rock a good blow." The lad obeyed, and though they all stood by in despair, he went down full of determination, and struck at the stone. The rock split in two and fell below, so that it no longer blocked the stream, and water rose till its depth from the bottom to the brim of the well was equal to the height of a palm tree. And they all drank of the water, and bathed in it. Then they cooked rice and ate it, and fed their oxen with it. And when the sun set, they put a flag in the well, and went to the place appointed. There they sold their merchandise at a good profit, and returned to their home, and when they died they passed away according to their deeds. And the Bodhisattva gave gifts, and did other virtuous acts, and he also passed away according to his deeds. After the teacher had told the story, he formed the connection by saying in conclusion, "The caravan the Bodhisattva, the future Buddha, the page who at that time despaired not, but broke the stone, and gave water to the multitude, was this brother without perseverance, and the other men were attendants on the Buddha." The sower Bharadvaja, a wealthy Brahmin farmer, was celebrating his harvest, Thanksgiving, when the Blessed One came with his alms bowl, begging for food. Some of the people paid him reverence, but the Brahmin was angry and said, "O Samana, it would be more fitting for thee to go to work than to beg. I plough and sow, and having ploughed and sown, I eat. If thou didst likewise, thou, too, wouldst have something to eat." The Tathagata answered him and said, "O Brahmin, if too, plough and sow, and having ploughed and sown, I eat." "Dost thou profess to be a husbandman?" replied the Brahmin. "Where, then, are thy bullocks? Where is the seed and the plough?" The Blessed One said, "Faith is the seed I sow. Good works are the rain that fertilizes it. Wisdom and modesty are the plough. My mind is the guiding rein. I lay hold of the handle of the law. Earnestness is the goad I use, and exertion is my draught ox. This ploughing is ploughed to destroy the weeds of illusion. The harvest it yields is the immortal fruits of nirvana, and thus all sorrow ends." Then the Brahmin poured rice, milk into a golden bowl, and offered it to the Blessed One, saying, "Let the teacher of mankind partake of the rice milk, for the venerable Gautama ploughs a ploughing that bears the fruit of immortality." The outcast when Bhagavat dwelt at Savatthi in the Jetavana, he went out with his alms bowl to beg for food, and approached the house of a Brahmin priest while the fire of an offering was blazing upon the altar, and the priest said, "Stay there, O shaveling, stay there, O wretched Samana, thou art an outcast." The Blessed One replied, "Who is an outcast? An outcast is the man who is angry and bears hatred, the man who is wicked and hypocritical, he who embraces error and is full of deceit, Whosoever is a provoker, and is avaricious, has evil desires, is envious, wicked, shameless, and without fear to commit wrong, let him be known as an outcast. Not by birth does one become an outcast, not by birth does one become a Brahmin. By deeds one becomes an outcast, by deeds one becomes a Brahmin. The woman at the well, Ananda, the favorite disciple of the Buddha, having been sent by the Lord on a mission, passed by a well near a village, and seeing Pakati, a girl of the Matanga caste, he asked her for water to drink. Pakati said, "O Brahman, I am too humble and mean to give thee water to drink. Do not ask any service of me, lest thy holiness be contaminated, for I am of low caste." And Ananda replied, "I ask not for caste, but for water." And the Matanga girl's heart leaped joyfully, and she gave Ananda to drink. Ananda thanked her and went away, but she followed him at a distance. Having heard that Ananda was a disciple of Gautama Sakyamuni, the girl repaired to the Blessed One and cried, "O Lord, help me, and let me live in the place where Ananda thy disciple dwells, so that I may see him and minister unto him, for I love Ananda." The Blessed One understood the emotions of her heart, and he said, "Pakati, thy heart is full of love, but thou understandest not thine own sentiments. It is not Ananda that thou lovest, but his kindness. Accept, then, the kindness thou hast seen him practice unto thee, and in the humility of thy station practice it unto others. Verily there is great merit in the generosity of a king when he is kind to a slave, but there is a greater merit in the slave when he ignores the wrongs which he suffers and cherishes kindness and good will to all mankind. He will cease to hate his oppressors, and even when powerless to resist their usurpation, will with compassion pity their arrogance and supercilious demeanor. Blessed art thou, Pakati, for though thou art a Matanga, thou wilt be a model for noblemen and noble women. Thou art of low caste, but Brahmins may learn a lesson from thee. Swerve not from the path of justice and righteousness, and thou wilt outshine the royal glory of queens on the throne. The peacemaker, it is reported that 2 kingdoms were on the verge of war, the possession of a certain embankment which was disputed by them, and the Buddha, seeing the kings and their armies ready to fight, requested them to tell him the cause of their quarrels. Having heard the complaints on both sides, he said, "I understand that the embankment has value for some of your people. Has it any intrinsic value aside from its service to your men?" "It has no intrinsic value," whatever was the reply. The Tathagata continued, "Now when you go to battle, is it not sure that many of your men will be slain, and that you yourselves, O kings, are liable to lose your lives?" And they said, "It is sure that many will be slain, and our own lives be jeopardized. The blood of men, however," said Buddha, "has it less intrinsic value than a mound of earth? No." The king said, "The lives of men, and above all the lives of kings, are priceless." Then the Tathagata concluded, "Care you going to stake that which is priceless against that which has no intrinsic value whatever?" The wrath of the 2 monarchs abated, and they came to a peaceable agreement. The hungry Dioji, there was a great king who oppressed his people, and was hated by his subjects. Yet when the Tathagata came into his kingdom, the king desired much to see him. So he went to the place where the Blessed One stayed and asked, "O Sakyamuni, canst thou teach a lesson to the king that will divert his mind and benefit him at the same time?" And the Blessed One said, "I shall tell thee the parable of the hungry dog. There was a wicked tyrant, and the god Indra, assuming the shape of a hunter, came down upon earth with the demon Matali. The latter appearing as a dog of enormous size. Hunter and dog entered the palace, and the dog howled so woefully that the royal buildings shook by the sound to their very foundations. The tyrant had the awe-inspiring hunter brought before his throne, and inquired after the cause of the terrible bark. The hunter said, "The dog is hungry," whereupon the frightened king ordered food for him. All the food prepared at the royal banquet disappeared rapidly in the dog's jaws, and still he howled with portentous significance. More food was sent for, and all the royal store houses were emptied, but in vain. Then the tyrant grew desperate and asked, "Will nothing satisfy the cravings of that woeful beast?" "Nothing," replied the hunter, "nothing except perhaps the flesh of all his enemies." "And who are his enemies?" anxiously asked the tyrant. The hunter replied, The dog will howl as long as there are people hungry in the kingdom, and his enemies are those who practice injustice and oppress the poor. The oppressor of the people, remembering his evil deeds, was seized with remorse, and for the first time in his life he began to listen to the teachings of righteousness. Having ended his story, Blessed One addressed the king, who had turned pale, and said to him, "The Tathagata can quicken the spiritual ears of the powerful, and when thou, great king, hearest the dog bark, think of teachings of the Buddha, and thou mayest still learn to pacify the monster." The despot cured King Brahmadatta happened to see a beautiful woman, the wife of a Brahmin merchant, and, conceiving a passion for her, ordered a precious jewel secretly to be dropped into the merchant's carriage. The jewel was missed, searched for, and found. The merchant was arrested on the charge of stealing, and the king pretended to listen with great attention to the defense, and with seeming regret ordered the merchant to be executed, while his wife was consigned to the royal harem. Brahmadatta attended the execution in person, for such sights were wont to give him pleasure. But when the doomed man looked with deep compassion at his infamous judge, a flash of the Buddha's wisdom lit up the king's passion-beclouded mind, and while the executioner raised the sword for the fatal stroke, Brahmadatta felt the effect in his own mind, and he imagined he saw himself on the block. "Hold, executioner!" shouted Brahmadatta, "it is the king whom thou slayest." But it was too late. The executioner had done the bloody deed. The king fell back in a swoon, and when he awoke a change had come over him. He had ceased to be the cruel despot, and henceforth led a life of holiness and rectitude. The people said that the character of the Brahmin had been impressed into his mind. "O you who commit murders and robberies, the evil of self-delusion covers your eyes. If you could see things as they are, not as they appear, you would no longer inflict injuries and pain on your own selves. You see not that you will have to atone for your evil deeds, for what you sow you will reap." Vasavadatta, there was a courtesan in Mathura named Vasavadatta. She happened to see Upaggata, one of Buddha's disciples, a tall and beautiful youth, and fell desperately in love with him. Sent an invitation to the young man, but he replied, "The time has not yet arrived when Upaggata will visit Vasavadatta." The courtesan was astonished at the reply, and she sent again for him, saying, "Vasavadatta desires love, not gold, from Upaggata." But Upaggata made the same enigmatic reply and did not come. A few months later, Vasavadatta was having a love intrigue with the chief of the artisans, but at that time a wealthy merchant came to Mathura and fell in love with Vasavadatta. Seeing his wealth and fearing the jealousy of her other lover, she contrived the death of the chief of the artisans and concealed his body under a dung hill. When the chief of the artisans had disappeared, his relatives and friends searched for him and found his body. Vasavadatta was tried by a judge and condemned to have her ears and nose, her hands and feet cut off and flung into a graveyard. Vasavadatta had been a passionate girl, but kind to her servants, and one of her maids followed her, and out of love for her former mistress ministered to her in her agonies, and chased away crows. Now the time had arrived when Upaggata decided to visit Vasavadatta. When he came, the poor woman ordered her maid to collect and hide under a cloth her severed limbs, and he greeted her kindly, but she said with petulance, "Once this body was fragrant like lotus, and I offered thee my love. In those days I was covered with pearls and fine muslin. Now I am mangled by the executioner, and covered with filth and blood." "Sister," said the young man, "it is not for my pleasure that I approach thee. It is to restore to thee a nobler beauty than the charms which thou hast lost. I have seen with mine eyes the Tathagata walking upon earth and teaching men his wonderful doctrine, but thou wouldst not have listened to the words of righteousness while surrounded with temptations, while under the spell of passion and yearning for worldly pleasures. Thou wouldst not have listened to the teachings of the Tathagata, for thy heart was wayward, and thou didst set thy trust on the sham of thy transient charms. The charms of a lovely form are treacherous, and quickly lead into temptations which have proved too strong for thee. But there is a beauty which will not fade, and if thou wilt but listen to the doctrine of our Lord the Buddha, thou wilt find that peace which thou wouldst have found in the restless world of sinful pleasures." Vasavadatta became calm, and a spiritual happiness soothed the tortures of her bodily pain, for where there is much suffering, there is also great bliss. Having taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, she died in pious submission to the punishment of her crime. The marriage feast in Jambanata, there was a man in Jambanata who was to be married the next day, and he thought, would that the Buddha, the Blessed One, might be present at the wedding. And the Blessed One passed by his house and met him, and when he read the silent wish in the heart of the bridegroom, he consented to enter. When the Holy One appeared with the retinue of his many bhikkhus, the host, whose means were limited, received them as best he could, saying, "Eat, my lord, and all thy congregation, according to your desire." While the holy men ate, the meats and drinks remained undiminished, and the host thought to himself, "How wondrous is this! I should have had plenty for all my relatives and friends. Would that I had invited them all. When this thought was in the host's mind, all his relatives and friends entered the house, and although the hall in the house was small, there was room in it for all of them. They sat down at the table and ate, and there was more than enough for all of them. The Blessed One was pleased to see so many guests full of good cheer, and he quickened them and gladdened them with words of truth, proclaiming the bliss of righteousness. The greatest happiness which a mortal man can imagine is the bond of marriage that ties together two loving hearts. But there is a greater happiness still. It is the embrace of truth. Death will separate husband and wife, but death will never affect him who has espoused the truth. Therefore be married unto the truth, and live with the truth in holy wedlock. The husband who loves his wife and desires for a union that shall be everlasting must be faithful to her so as to be like truth itself, and she will rely upon him and revere him and minister unto him. And the wife who loves her husband and desires a union that shall be everlasting must be faithful to him so as to be like truth itself, and he will place his trust in her, he will provide for her. Verily, I say unto you, their children will become like their parents and will bear witness to their happiness. Let no man be single, let every one be wedded in holy love to the truth. And when Mara, the destroyer, comes to separate the visible forms of your being, you will continue to live in the truth and will partake of the life everlasting, for the truth is immortal. There was no one among the guests but was strengthened in his spiritual life, and recognized the sweetness of a life of righteousness, and they took refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. In search of a thief having sent out his disciples, the Blessed One himself wandered from place to place until he reached Uruvela. On his way he sat down in a grove to rest, and it happened that in that same grove was a party of 30 friends who were enjoying themselves with their wives, and while they were sporting, some of their goods were stolen. Then the whole party went in search of the thief, and meeting the Blessed One sitting under a tree, saluted him and said, "Pray, Lord, didst thou see the thief pass by with our goods?" And the Blessed One said, "Which is better for you, that you go in search for the thief or for yourselves?" And the youths cried, "In search for ourselves." "Well then," said the Blessed One, "sit down, and I will preach the truth to you." And the whole party sat down, and they listened eagerly to the words of the Blessed One. Having grasped the truth, they praised the doctrine and took refuge in the Buddha. In the realm of Yamaraja there was a Brahmin, a religious man and fond in his affections, but without deep wisdom. He had a son of great promise, who, when 7 years old, was struck with a fatal disease and died. The unfortunate father was unable to control himself. He threw himself upon the corpse, and lay there as one dead. The relatives came and buried the dead child, and when the father came to himself, he was so immoderate in his grief that he behaved like an insane person. He no longer gave way to tears, but wandered about asking for the residence of Yamaraja, the king of death, humbly to beg of him that his child might be allowed to return to life. Having arrived at a great Brahmin temple, the sad father went through certain religious rites and fell asleep. While wandering on in his dream, he came to a deep mountain pass, where he met a number of samanas, who had acquired supreme wisdom. "Kind sirs," he said, "can you not tell me where the residence of Yamaraju is?" And they asked him, "Good friend, why wouldst thou know?" Whereupon he told them his sad story, and explained his intentions. Pitying his self-delusion, the samana said, No mortal man can reach the place where Yama reigns, but some 400 miles westward lies a great city in which many good spirits live. Every 8th day of the month Yama visits the place, and there mayst thou see him, who is the king of death, and ask him for a boon." The Brahmin, rejoicing at the news, went to the city, and found it as the Samanas had told him. He was admitted to the dread presence of Yama, the king of death, who, on hearing his request, said, "Thy son now lives in the eastern garden, where he is disporting himself. Go there, and ask him to follow thee." Said the happy father, "How does it happen that my son, without having performed one good work, is now living in paradise?" Yamaraja replied, "He has obtained celestial happiness not for performing good deeds, but because he died in faith and in love to the Lord and Master, the most glorious Buddha. The Buddha says, 'The heart of love and faith spreads as it were a beneficent shade from the world of men to the world of gods. This glorious utterance is like the stamp of a king's seal upon a royal edict.'" The happy father hastened to the place and saw his beloved child playing with other children, all transfigured by the peace of the blissful existence of a heavenly life. He ran up to his boy and cried with tears running down his cheeks, my son, dost thou not remember me, thy father who watched over thee with loving care, and tended thee in thy sickness? Return home with me to the land of the living." But the boy, while struggling to go back to his playmates, upbraided him for using such strange expressions as father and son. "In my present state," he said, "I know no such words, for I am free from delusion." On this the Brahmin departed, and when he woke from his dream he bethought himself of the blessed master of mankind, the great Buddha, and resolved to go to him, lay bare his grief, and seek consolation. Having arrived at the Jetavana, the Brahmin told his story, and how his boy had refused to recognize him and to go home with him, and the world. The honored one said, "Truly thou art deluded. When man dies, the body is dissolved into its elements, but the spirit is not entombed. It leads a higher mode of life in which all the relative terms of father, son, wife, mother are at an end, just as a guest who leaves his lodging has done with it, as though it were a thing of past. Men concern themselves most about that which passes away, but the end of life quickly comes as a burning torrent, sweeping away the transient in a moment. They are like a blind man set to look after a burning lamp. A wise man, understanding the transiency of worldly relations, destroys the cause of grief, and escapes from the seething whirlpool of sorrow. Religious wisdom lifts a man above the pleasures and pains of the world, and gives him peace everlasting. The Brahmin asked the permission of the Blessed One to enter the community of his bhikkhus, so as to acquire that heavenly wisdom which alone can give comfort to an afflicted heart.